In a high-stakes move to rescue the UK economy from a £22 billion fiscal deficit, Chancellor Rachel Reeves rolled the dice with the 2024 autumn budget.
This budget raises taxes by £40 billion.
Her ambitious plan promised to raise $40 billion through sweeping tax reforms while simultaneously borrowing $32 billion for infrastructure and public services. It was hailed as a bold strategy to stabilise public finances without suffocating economic growth. As the 2025 Spring Statement looms on the horizon, a stark reality is emerging. The budget's key reforms may have missed the mark, leaving a trail of unintended consequences in their wake. We will compare the rosy projections against the harsh realities to uncover the winners and losers of this fiscal shake-up and explore the long-term risks that threaten to derail the UK's financial recovery. This information is being presented as neutral and it isn't intended to be political in any way. First, we have the employer national insurance contribution squeeze, now viewed as a short-term gain but with long-term risks. At the heart of the budget's revenue strategy was a significant increase in the employer national insurance contributions, NICs. From April the 6th, 2025, the rate rose from 13.8% to 15%, while the threshold at which employers started paying NICs dropped sharply from $9,100 to $5,000. Small businesses did receive partial relief via a double employment allowance of $10,500, but for larger firms, the changes translated into immediate cost hikes. By the first quarter of 2025, businesses with payrolls over $10,500 face stark choices. Unsurprisingly, the BDO survey also found that 23% of firms plan to either freeze wages or have hiring cuts, with sectors like hospitality and retail reliant on low-wage workers hit the hardest. The government is now walking on a fiscal tightrope. While the OBR initially projected a $25 billion increase in annual revenue from this reform, they also warned of a 15 to 20% erosion due to reduced hiring and wage stagnation. And this creates a paradox. Higher taxes today could mean slower growth tomorrow, undermining the very revenues that the budget seeks to secure. Next, we have changes to capital gains tax, described as a windfall but with hidden costs. The Chancellor's decision to raise capital gains tax rates, with basic rates from 10% to 18% and higher rates from 20 to 24%, triggered a rush for asset sales in late 2024. Investors scrambled to offload $8.4 billion in property, equities and other assets before the October 30th deadline, delivering a short-term revenue spike for the government, but this windfall has masked deeper issues. First, there has been an innovation drain. Entrepreneurs Relief, now known as Business Asset Disposal Relief, claims plummeted by 62%, with $1.2 billion redirected into pensions. For tech startups, this meant delayed exits and reduced liquidity, a blow to innovation. Venture capital firm Atomino reports a 15% drop in early-stage UK tech investments by Q1 2025, as founders opted for Ireland's 12.5% CGT rate or Estonia's 0% retained earnings tax. There's also been the lock-in effect. The OBR now forecasts annual revenue losses of $2.1 billion by 2027 as investors hold assets longer or shift wealth into tax-efficient vehicles like EISs, VCT schemes, etc. What began as revenue-raising measures now risks stifling the very investments that the UK needs to drive growth. Then we have inheritance tax and the rural economy, viewed as the perfect storm. The decision to cap agricultural and business property relief at £1 million per estate from April 2026 has sparked alarm in rural communities, as you've probably seen from the news lately with all the protests in London. Estates above this threshold now face a 20% effective inheritance tax rate, a dramatic shift from the previous 0%. And now, experts are warning of an expected liquidity crisis and potential collapse in land value. A National Farmers Union survey revealed that 68% of farms lack the cash reserves to cover these new bills, risking fire sales of land or equipment. Savills projects that agricultural land values could fall between 12 and 18% by 2027 as supply surges, destabilising rural economies. The ripple effects are stark. Experts are predicting that rural employment could drop by 45,000 jobs annually as estates either consolidate or sell to corporate buyers. Next, we have the introduction of VAT on private schools, now viewed as a zero-sum game. The introduction of the 20% VAT on private school fees in January 2025 aimed to raise £1.6 billion annually, but the policy's design flaws quickly became apparent. By March 2025, 150,000 pupils had already left private schools, overwhelming state institutions in affluent areas like Surrey and Buckinghamshire. And unfortunately, the net gains are already falling short of expectations. The Institute for Fiscal Studies calculates a net revenue gain of just £620 million per year, after accounting for the £980 million in state school costs, a 61% shortfall off the Treasury's target. Next, the non-dom exodus is already being described as a blow to investment. Scrapping the non-domicile tax regime in favour of a residency-based system triggered an immediate exodus. Brewin Dolphin states that by Q1 2025, 12% of non-doms, i.e. 3,800 individuals, had already relocated to Dubai or Switzerland, taking around 18 billion in assets with them. On top of this, there's also been a cultural and economic fallout. The CBI warns of a £1.2 billion annual loss in foreign direct investment as multinational executives avoid UK residency. Next, borrowing and debt is being described as a high wire act at the circus. The Treasury's decision to borrow £142 billion over 5 years, ostensibly to fund growth-driving projects like the Northern Powerhouse Rail, has come at a cost. Debt interest payments are now estimated to consume 3.7% of GDP, lightly exceeding the budgets for transport and justice combined. And this has led to a growth paradox. While the OBR projects a modest 0.7% growth in GDP from infrastructure spending, private sector R&D investments fell by 18% in 2025 as firms anticipated future tax hikes. With debt expected to be peaking at 104% of GDP in 2026, the UK faces a precarious balancing act. Growth must outpace borrowing costs, yet the OBR's 1% GDP forecast for 2025 offers little reassurance. So, with this all in mind and the 2025 spring statement just around the corner, can this be course corrected, or will any changes be just a sticking plaster? Scheduled for March the 26th, 2025, the spring statement represents a critical juncture. To address the budget's structural risks, policymakers may consider the following. Number one is national insurance contribution threshold revisions, raising the secondary threshold to £7,500 to ease pressure on the SMEs. The second thing being considered is inheritance tax relief adjustments, exempting working farms from the £1 million cap to prevent rural collapse. Third, we have growth incentives, introducing 150% tax relief for green R&D to offset the non-dom exodus. It must be said that the 2024 autumn budget did succeed in raising short-term revenue, but this also exposed the fragility of relying on behavioural inertia. The reform's success does hinge on precarious assumptions. One, that taxpayers won't adjust their strategies. Two, that businesses won't automate jobs. And number three, that wealth won't flee offshore. As the spring statement approaches, the government faces stark choices. Double down on existing measures or recalibrate to foster growth. Without sustainable expansion driven by skills, innovation and private investment, even record tax revenues will struggle to plug the deficit. The stakes couldn't be higher, and this isn't just about balancing the books, but securing Britain's economic future for decades to come. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And you may also want to watch this video here talking about potential changes in the spring statement.